He knew exactly how the king's life is in danger. He tried to warn them. They threw him out. But for the king, tragedy has already started. So then they come back for him. Dominic was a dietitian in his previous life. So when the old lord was eating unhealthy food daily, he warned the chef that this would lead to a disease. But the chef didn't appreciate this, took offense, and sent Dominic away, calling him a quack trying to scam them for money. Later, the king gets him kidnapped and says that he already is suffering from the disease he talked to the chef about. King thinks it's a curse and asks Dominic how to cure it. Dominic says it looks like gout, for real. The other lord says, yeah, that gout thing or whatever it's called. He asks if Dominic knows anything about that curse and says he feels like he's been cursed by someone. Dominic suddenly can't believe it. In his mind, he thinks gout is a curse. What kind of nonsense is that? It's obviously uric acid building up from terrible eating habits. 3 greasy meals a day with alcohol on top of that. What did you expect? But he can't just tell the old lord, my lord, that's a disease. The lord is looking at him like he's some quack or dark mage trying to brand him. Then Dominic realizes, wait, if the lord really thought that, he'd be in a dungeon, not a bedroom like this. This old man is desperate to get rid of his gout. After understanding all of this, Dominic says that the pain usually starts suddenly, with swelling around the big toe or ankle. The Lord tells him to go on. Dominic says the pain tends to get worse at night or early dawn, and sometimes it doesn't even start in the foot. It can begin in the elbow or finger joints. Once it starts, even a breeze brushing against it hurts, but then some days it vanishes like it was never there. He asks if he's right. The Lord says yes, that's correct. Then Dominic says that this is not a curse. It's a disease called gout. The Lord asks if he's saying it's not a curse, then why does someone get this so-called disease? Dominic immediately explains that there are several causes, but the biggest one is diet. He says there's a substance called purine, or simply certain nutrients found in fatty foods, that doesn't get properly flushed out and builds up, starting problems from the extremities. The Lord says he's lived like this his entire life and was fine until recently, so why would it suddenly flare up now? Dominic explains that as people age, their digestive system weakens, or what has accumulated over the years may only now be causing trouble. He adds that he's not a healer, so he can't say for certain. This is only speculation. After hearing this, the Lord questions how Dominic knows so much about such a rare disease if he's not a healer. Dominic thinks to himself that this is it. He's got to sell this properly. Then Dominic says he once traveled with a master who taught him that if you use ingredients wisely, they become medicine. The master believed that food and medicine share the same root. Dominic explains that the world is made up of 5 energies, and if one eats in harmony with those energies, one aligns with nature and can live long and free of illness. The Lord thinks about it and says that 5 energies, you say, are you referring to the elements that make up mana? He asks what Dominic's master's name is. Dominic says his name is June, he's called Hyo June, and he starts crying as he says it. He says how much he misses him, master. Dominic thinks to himself, thank you, Hyo June. Long live the precious mirror of Eastern medicine. The Lord says Hyo June is an unusual name, and judging by how Dominic weeps, he must have trained under a true master. He even suggests that perhaps his master carried the blood of ancient elves. Dominic thinks that sounded natural. Nice. Then the Lord says that since Dominic is not a healer, he cannot command him to treat his illness. But this will do. Dominic will take responsibility for his meals. He says this with a very serious look, adding that whether Dominic fooled him with that silver tongue or truly inherited ancient elven wisdom, he will find out. Suddenly, Dominic gets a bit scared and wonders what's going on. Later, we see him thinking, what have I gotten myself into? He reminds himself that he did work in a general hospital cafeteria for about a year, so he can handle patient meals at least. But his thoughts keep spiraling. He thinks he's never done personalized VIP nutrition plans. This isn't some basic cafeteria gig. This is consulting level work. If they're paying big, they'll expect top-tier quality. First, fatty cuts and alcohol are obviously banned. He's not sure if the Lord will tolerate vegetables, though. He decides to head to the kitchen and investigate further. As he enters the kitchen, a voice suddenly asks where he's going. Dominic gets startled and says that he was surprised. Then he asks, what, were you standing over here, Sir Knight? The knight says his lordship ordered him to attend Dominic day and night. He introduces himself as Ian Hanover, a knight of the Sinclair house. Dominic thinks that's not attending, that's surveillance. Then Dominic says that to prepare a proper diet, he needs to understand his lordship's lifestyle and health condition. He says he'd like to meet the physician and the cook, and he'll need input from the servants too. Suddenly, Ian says denied. This surprises Dominic. Ian explains that everything Dominic mentioned concerns his lordship's confidential personal affairs. As an outsider, he neither needs to know nor is permitted to know. Dominic thinks, what is with this stubborn blockhead? He still says that since they told him to prepare the meal plan, he should go. Ian responds that he doubts his lordship meant it seriously. He says Dominic should simply compose a healthy menu and pass it to the kitchen. That will suffice. Dominic says understood and thinks, whatever. If something goes wrong later, it's on him. Ian adds that he honestly doesn't believe food could possibly cure illnesses. Dominic then says, Sir Knight, if I manage to ease his lordship's condition with nothing but food, will you reconsider your stance? Ian reacts with a what? Dominic, with an even more serious gaze, says that to some, food is just a simple meal, but to others, that single meal can mean everything. Even Ian gets a bit intrigued. He admits Dominic is right and says he wasn't trying to mock the starving. He only meant that rice cannot become medicine. Dominic replies that regardless, he has received his lordship's command and will do his utmost. He asks Ian to kindly refrain from interfering. Ian says Dominic's tone seems rather insolent. Dominic says not at all and thinks that he may be a knight, but he's still his lordship's guest. There's no reason for him to shrink back. As Dominic moves ahead, a weapon is suddenly held close to him, and a voice asks where he's headed. He screams a bit on seeing the sword so close and says he's heading to the kitchen. Why? Ian stays silent for a moment, then says the kitchen is the other way. When Dominic finally reaches there, the chef says that the quack didn't die and crawled back again. Dominic responds, hey now, what kind of unlucky thing is that to say? It's a misunderstanding, head chef. The chef says he heard the knights drag Dominic off and figured he'd been chewed out, but guess not. Then he asks what brings Dominic here. Dominic says he's been tasked with managing his lordship's meals for the time being. This shocks the head chef. He calls Dominic a rotten brat trying to steal his job and says he's got a rabbit-like daughter and a bear-like wife to feed. At this rate, he'll be the one dying. Dominic quickly clarifies that he misunderstood. He says he's only there to sort the ingredients. He's just an assistant, nothing more. The chef questions it. His assistant? Dominic says yeah. Let's call it that. Then Dominic thinks, does kitchen hazing exist here too? The chef says that everything that reaches his lordship is already top quality. Dominic replies that more importantly, he needs to filter out ingredients that don't suit him. He explains that everyone has a different constitution and they need to identify what's specifically bad for his lordship. Ian chimes in, asking if ingredients suited to one's constitution really exist. Dominic says of course, even the mana Ian trains with daily contains different energies, doesn't it? He asks if there's a particular energy that resonates especially well with him. Ian admits that's true. Dominic continues, saying that if even mana aligns with one's constitution, then so do ingredients grown while absorbing the world's mana. Naturally, their effects differ depending on the person. The chef, now impressed, says he thought Dominic was a fraud, but that's surprisingly persuasive. He asks if from now on Dominic will pick out ingredients unsuited for his lordship's constitution. Dominic says exactly, and adds that the head chef grasps things quickly. Then Dominic thinks that this world's foundation in nutrition science is seriously lacking. If he starts rambling about nutrients, no one will understand, so he has to explain it like this. He then asks if it's true that his lordship once reached a remarkable level as a knight in his youth. Ian confirms that it's true. He even served as captain of the Imperial Guard. Dominic adds that now that he's retired, his training volume must have decreased compared to then. Ian agrees, saying the Lord still trains privately, but it can't compare to his active years. An active knight's regimen is beyond imagination. Dominic says that even if his lordship's training has lessened, his food intake wouldn't have been cut in half, right? After thinking for a bit, the chef says he doesn't know how much the Lord ate in his youth, but the butler who served him for years said his portions haven't changed much. If anything, his lordship eats at least 1.5 times what an ordinary person does. Maybe that's why he's filled out lately. Dominic says he's definitely a big eater, and every meal is meat, no less. Ian then adds that now that he thinks about it, when the Lord wasn't feeling well recently, he deliberately ate even more meat. Hearing this, Dominic suddenly snaps and asks what, then blurts out if they've lost their minds. The chef fires back, asking what nonsense that is. He says when you're ill, you eat hearty meat and fish, that's common sense. You need strength to fight off sickness, don't you? Dominic thinks that sounds like a fast track to making things worse. Back when the Lord was active, his activity level and digestion could handle it, but after retirement, those lifestyle changes became the root of the problem. This so-called common sense is completely flawed. Ian asks what's wrong with him, and even the chef admits he has no idea. Dominic realizes this is exactly what led to the disaster. So he declares that starting today, his lordship's table will be cleared of all red meat, oily fish, shellfish, and alcohol. The chef is shocked and asks what they're supposed to serve him then. He says the Lord will explode in fury and asks if Dominic is planning to hold a funeral. Dominic says he'll take responsibility. He adds that chicken, white fish, and eggs are allowed, but their portions will be halved. The chef grabs his head and groans in disbelief. Dominic takes his hand and tells the head chef he has to trust him. Then Dominic thinks that otherwise, he's the one who's going to end up dead. And later that evening, the Lord thinks this is the dinner he's been waiting for every single day, and it's not meat and whiskey. Suddenly, another person blurts out, "What kind of lightning strike is this?" The Lord thinks tonight's table feels strangely unfamiliar. However, the lady looks quite happy. She says the colors are beautiful, Father. Another person adds that all the dishes are so vibrant, such a feast for the eyes. The Lord says, "Is that so?" Then he'll judge after he tastes it. He takes a sip and immediately notes that it's not wine. The other person says this is pomegranate, isn't it? The lady says the tartness really whets the appetite and asks how it is. The Lord says, not bad. He thinks to himself that it has a gentle acidity balanced with the sweetness of seasonal fruit, even a slight bitter finish. It has the complexity of a fine wine. Then he looks at the next plate and asks what this is. Dominic explains that it's finely chopped button mushrooms, asparagus, and broccoli, sautéed in olive oil, then simmered with fresh milk and cream. He tells him to give it a try. The Lord takes a spoonful and puts it in his mouth, and he can't believe what he's tasting. The kids immediately panic and ask if he's all right. The Lord suddenly snaps, calling Dominic a scoundrel and demanding to know what he put in the food. Then he cuts himself off. He thinks that it fills the mouth with a nutty richness, almost like roasted nuts, with a texture that's smooth and velvety. Dominic explains that it's mushroom soup with asparagus and broccoli. He adds that mushrooms help improve digestion and prevent atherosclerosis. Asparagus is rich in potassium and vitamins, and broccoli has anti-cancer properties, boosts immunity, and helps prevent osteoporosis. The Lord thinks to himself that he never expected spirit vegetables to create such depth of flavor. Then he admits Dominic has some skill. He'll give him that. Dominic thinks that if the Lord didn't like it, he'd have his head already, so there's no need to scare people like that. Then Dominic says now for the main dish. As he thinks to himself, good, they've survived so far. And as the main dish is brought in and the children watch, Dominic thinks it's time to land the knockout blow. As the main dish arrives, Dominic presents it as a cod steak infused with 5 herbs to elevate its aroma. He explains that it's low-fat, high-protein, relieves fatigue, restores stamina, promotes vascular health, and is good for bones, liver function, and immunity. The Lord says fish steak, huh. He thinks the outside is seared, it looks crisp, but as he takes a bite, he's shocked. He thinks the inside is incredibly moist and tender. How is this texture even possible? The kids get scared again and call out to him. The Lord says that's enough. He won't be fooled anymore. But then he changes tone and says, "Oh ho, is that so? Let's eat." As he continues, he thinks it's been a while since he's had such a comfortable meal. After finishing, he says it was quite a satisfying dinner. Dominic lets out a sigh of relief and thinks he survived. He realizes stepping back from a fully vegetarian spread was the right call. But the Lord adds that they still don't know if it has any effect on his illness and calls out to Ian. Ian responds, "Yes, my lord." The Lord then says that if their guest wanders the vast castle at night, it would be troublesome. He orders Ian to make sure Dominic does not step even a single foot outside. Ian agrees and calls the guards. Dominic isn't happy about this and thinks, damn it, he ends up getting locked up again. Later that night, the Lord thinks that night has fallen again and wonders how long he'll have to endure the foot pain that visits him every night. The strong whiskey he once drank to escape the fear is gone now. Backtracking on his words would cost him his pride, so maybe he should just force himself to sleep. As he lies down, he notices something strange. He wonders if his bed has always been this comfortable. The bed that was once drenched in pain feels different tonight, cozy and soft. He also realizes that dinner was quite satisfying. He ate his fill and didn't feel bloated. He thinks about how, in the days when it was nothing but meat and alcohol, compared to today's meal rich in vegetables and fruit, this was truly pleasant. He reflects that even beasts must live within nature, so meat and vegetables must exist in harmony. Finally, he admits to himself that while his stubbornness had only grown, he definitely feels quite well. The next day arrives. As a butterfly lands on his finger, Dominic says that it's free, how wonderful it would be if he could fly freely like it. The butterfly flies away, and Dominic immediately says that he wants to go over there. He wants to follow the butterfly and fly alongside it. Ian tells him to come on, hurry. Dominic keeps saying come on, hurry. hurry. Ian starts getting frustrated and snaps, asking if Dominic has no hands or feet, he should move himself. Dominic yells back that Ian said he wasn't allowed to take a single step. He asks if Ian has any idea how hard it is not to let his feet touch the ground. He adds that it's already been a week since his lordship suddenly entered cloistered training, and he never said Dominic could go home, so isn't that why they're stuck like this? Besides, he's been properly preparing the meals as ordered, so Ian should hurry up and push him. Ian can barely take it, but Dominic keeps insisting, push, so Ian finally gives in and starts pushing him. Then Dominic casually asks if anything really changes from cloistered training. Ian explains that to surpass one's realm, one must gain enlightenment, and cloistered training is the best way to avoid distractions. Dominic thinks this sounds straight out of a martial arts novel. He asks how long it usually takes. Ian says it varies by person, it could take hours at best or years at worst. Dominic is shocked and repeats years, thinking that if it really takes that long, then this is completely hopeless. Ian stays silent and keeps pushing. After a while, Dominic asks if his lordship left any word about where he should be confined. Ian pauses and says there was no such instruction, was there? Dominic then explains that he has already written out the diet plans and handed them to the head chef. As long as he doesn't run away, that should be enough, right? Ian thinks for a moment, clearly surprised. Then later that afternoon, Dominic is seen reading a letter. It says that the Evergreen Village chief may return home now. However, each week someone will be sent from the castle, and Dominic is to record in detail the Lord's diet and recipes. In exchange, he will be paid gold every month, as long as he fulfills his duty faithfully. Dominic finally feels relieved. He says yes, my lord, and thinks he'll just treat this like a one-week business trip. Ian then tells him to pack up. They're leaving. Dominic agrees right away, but then notices Ian's bag and asks where he's going. Ian replies Evergreen. Dominic reacts in surprise, realizing Ian is coming along. Ian explains that it's his lordship's order to escort him, just in case he tries to flee, calling him a sly little rat. Later, Ian arrives with Dominic at the village. Dominic points ahead and says that's Evergreen, over there. Ian looks out and says so it's by the sea? Dominic replies that he already told him, it's a fishing village. He even says how many times does he have to repeat it. The previous chief spots him right away and calls out that the brat actually made it back alive. Dominic shoots back, asking what, was he supposed to come back dead? Uncle Kalen, the previous chief, brushes it off and says whatever, he's just glad Dominic is safe. He tells him to get over there and help. Dominic gets confused and asks if something happened. Uncle Kalen says the devil's hand has appeared in the sea. Dominic thinks, what is that even supposed to be? But Ian immediately reacts with concern and asks if he really said the devil's hand. Dominic thinks he's the only one who doesn't know what that is. Ian asks if the devil's hand has already started growing on its own. Uncle Kalen quickly clarifies that no, it's the farmer turtle season, and it looks like they've already laid eggs along the beach at the edge of the village. Ian says this is bad, worst case scenario. Dominic finally asks what in the world they're talking about. Ian fires back, asking what kind of fishing village chief doesn't know this. Dominic awkwardly admits he's not actually a fisherman and thinks it's not like he became chief because he wanted to. Uncle Kalen explains that the devil's hand is a sea plant cultivated by farmer turtles. He adds that maybe you could call it a sea tree. When fully grown, it's easily 3 times the height of a grown man. Because of those things, fishing boats can't even set sail. And even if you cut them down while dodging the farmer turtles, they grow back just as dense within days. He continues that that's not even the worst part. The farmer turtles are vicious. They chase away all the big fish near the coast, so the villagers return empty-handed. Ian finds it strange and says he heard farmer turtles rarely show up near beaches where people live. Uncle Kalen casually says that's nothing special. When they first built the village, he got scammed on the land deal and had no idea farmer turtles would show up every few years. Hearing that, both Ian and Dominic are stunned and think he's actually laughing about it. A little later, as they head toward the edge of the land near the sea, Uncle Kalen says they'll get a better view from here. Ian looks out and says it's pretty big. Uncle Kalen explains that there are a lot of farmer turtles this time, and it looks like they planted almost fully grown devil's hands right from the start. Ian says it looks peaceful to him. Dominic agrees it looks peaceful, so what's so serious about it? Ian tells him to look closely at the sea. Dominic squints and says he doesn't see anything. Ian suddenly shouts, telling him to look at the black things rising over there. Dominic finally spots them and casually says seaweed. Ian freezes, confused, and asks what? Dominic repeats that where he's from, they call that seaweed. Then he jokingly asks why Ian is suddenly discriminating against regions. Ian looks again and admits it really has grown thick. Dominic nods and says yeah, it's really dense. He adds that if you made soup with that, you'd finish a bowl in no time. He's clearly tempted and says he wants to try eating some. Ian is shocked and asks if he just said eat the devil's hand. Dominic casually asks why not. Ian answers because it's the devil's hand. Uncle Kalen suddenly pauses and wonders out loud why they never thought of eating it before. He actually seems interested. Ian can't believe it and thinks they're seriously considering eating it. As they walk off, Dominic encourages Uncle Kalen to try some, saying it's really good. Uncle Kalen agrees, saying it's been a while since he's had Dominic's cooking. Ian, meanwhile, is horrified and silently questions if these people are even sane. A little later, they arrive at the kitchen. Dominic looks around and says it's been a long time since he's been here. Ian comments that for a small village kitchen, it's actually pretty well kept. Dominic proudly says of course it is. Who does Ian think uses it? Ian mutters that Dominic can't even speak properly. Dominic then wonders what they should do about the ingredients. Uncle Kalen says it probably went bad from poor storage. But Dominic suddenly brightens up and says it dried nicely. This is perfect. Uncle Kalen looks at it in disbelief and says it's bone dry and crumbling apart. And Dominic is calling that good? Dominic insists that yes, it's even better this way. He explains that seaweed, he corrects himself from saying devil's hand, actually tastes richer when it's dried. Uncle Kalen says that's interesting. Dominic gets ready and says it's time to show off his skills after so long. He starts cooking, saying first mince the garlic, then heat the pot over high heat. He drizzles in freshly pressed perilla oil, adds dried mussels and rehydrated seaweed, and stir-fries everything together with the minced garlic. Ian watches and wonders what this is. He's never smelled anything like it before, but it smells incredible. Still, when Dominic looks his way, Ian quickly turns his head like he's not interested. Dominic thinks he went through hell recreating all the Korean seasonings and condiments in this world, and now he finally gets to use them properly. It was worth it. He notices there isn't much rice left and decides to be generous anyway. Ian thinks Dominic is acting all proud, while Dominic notices Ian keeps sneaking glances despite pretending not to care. He thinks how is he supposed to ignore that this is his chance to one-up the night. Ian suddenly asks what in the world Dominic is doing as he sees him pour something into the pot. Dominic asks what does it look like. Ian questions why he's pouring wastewater from washing food into the pot. Dominic immediately corrects him, saying it's not wastewater. Rice rinse water is basically the golden rule for soup. He explains he already threw away the first 2 washes in case there was dirt. He adds that rice water contains starch, lipids, vitamins B1 and B2. It helps ingredients blend their flavors, removes fishy smells, and cuts bitterness. Then he tells Ian to stop interrupting if he doesn't know what he's talking about. Ian pauses, a bit stunned, and admits he didn't understand half of that, but asks if Dominic is saying it's good. Dominic fires back, asking if Ian has been fooled his whole life or something. Then Dominic shifts tone and says that Ian isn't like the other knights. He doesn't look down on commoners, treats Dominic casually, and even speaks respectfully to Uncle Kalen. He also acknowledges the head chef's position at the Lord's castle. But Dominic adds that Ian is too rigid. As he continues cooking, he tells Ian that maybe he should try to understand and accept cultural differences. Just then, as Dominic finishes up, Uncle Kalen happily comes over with a dish and says he fried up a fish. Dominic says he was wondering where Uncle Kalen went and thanks him. He adds that the rice is ready, so they should hurry and sit down. Ian calmly looks around, then takes a sip of the soup. He thinks this dish was really made from the devil's hand. Dominic explains it's seaweed soup with mussels. He says it improves blood circulation and supports bone and gut health. It's rich in iron, calcium, iodine, and omega-3, good for preventing anemia, high in dietary fiber, and helps with constipation and cholesterol. He even adds it's especially good for postpartum recovery. Ian thinks he can't hold back. His hands and mouth are moving on their own. He keeps eating more and more while Dominic watches him. Dominic then asks Uncle if it's good. Uncle Kalen happily says it's delicious and asks for another bowl. Dominic jokingly reminds him that rice is expensive. Then Dominic asks what they're going to do about the seaweed, the devil's hand. Uncle Kalen says that if the knight helps drive off the farmer turtles, they'll have to pull it all up by the roots. Dominic points out that they just said it was delicious. Are they really going to throw it away? At that, they all just stop and look at him. A cart pulls up, and a voice complains, asking if they really have to stop here too. Another voice adds that it just looks like some tiny village with nothing to sell. An older man laughs and tells him not to judge a place by its appearance. He says who knows, one day this little fishing village might flourish. And for a small small merchant group like theirs, every trade partner matters. You have to understand the value of each customer. The younger one laughs and agrees, calling him Grandpa. Then he realizes Evergreen was a fishing village and says the name is kind of misleading. Uncle Kalen greets them warmly, calling out to the old man. Dominic also greets him and asks if he's been well, village chief. Uncle Kalen immediately tells him to drop the village chief title, saying it was a hassle, so he handed it over to this punk, adding that Dominic is still as stubborn as ever. The merchant gets straight to business and says he brought 3 sacks of rice this time, asking what they think. Uncle Kalen says of course they'll buy all of it, but more importantly, Dominic cuts in and asks if they've eaten. He serves them the seaweed soup he made earlier. The merchant looks at it and asks what that black thing is. Uncle Kalen casually says they call it seaweed or something and tells him to try it. It'll warm him right up. The grandson tastes it first and excitedly tells his grandfather to try it, saying it has a deeper flavor than most seaweed stews. As the grandfather tastes it, he realizes the rich flavor isn't coming from meat, it's coming from that black ingredient. His merchant instincts kick in, and he immediately recognizes it as a jackpot. Dominic, with a slightly mischievous expression, asks how much they should prepare and adds that there's more than enough supply. A few days later, at the Lord's territory, a man is worrying about his wife. He thinks she gave birth recently but still hasn't regained her strength. She barely eats, and her milk isn't coming in properly. As he walks around, he suddenly notices a delicious smell. Then someone starts shouting, calling people to try a sample. He says if they like it, they can take some home. He introduces it as seaweed, no, devil's hand soup, the sea vegetable that farmer turtles supposedly feast on after laying eggs. He claims it's especially good for pregnant women and new mothers. The man immediately takes some home. His wife sees it and asks what it is. He says they told him it's really good for postpartum recovery and that they even showed him how to cook it. Just wait a moment. Meanwhile, Anton is out in the streets shouting that seaweed is for sale, perilla oil included. He calls people to try it, saying the price is 50 cheap. A man excitedly says his wife finally got her strength back and her milk is flowing well again. He asks for 2 sets, no 3. Another person jumps in, asking if it's really true, then says give him 1 right now. Someone else says it really helps with milk production and asks for 1 too. Another adds that his daughter just gave birth recently, so he'll take 3 sets as well. Anton smiles, thinking this might actually sell out completely. He realizes he needs to secure more stock and wonders how that young village chief knows all this. Cut to Dominic, laughing and jumping with joy. He says he couldn't even try making it before because rice was too expensive, but now he finally can. He's glad the seaweed is selling better than expected. Anton keeps asking for more shipments too. Looks like his luck is finally turning around. Then Ian walks in and points out that the pot is overflowing. He adds that the spicy aroma is filling the air. Dominic grins and says this is how you're supposed to eat tteokbokki, asking if Ian wants a bite. Ian says thank you, and once again they start eating something new and tasty. Dominic happily says he's going to enjoy this. Even Ian can't wait and says me too. But just as they're about to eat, a man suddenly arrives and calls out for Dominic, the village chief of Evergreen, to heed the command of the Lord. The room quickly fills with the Lord's men. One of them reads out that the Count of Sinclair, Lord of these lands, has spoken. Dominic, village chief of Evergreen, is to present himself at Sinclair Castle at once. Soldiers have been dispatched, and refusal will not be accepted. Dominic is visibly shaken after hearing this. Another man adds that he has also received the Lord's order to watch over him. Ian steps in and says they should at least confirm what this is about. But later, the Lord coldly repeats the order. Make sure he does not step even a single foot outside. The guards respond, yes, my lord. And just like that, they take Dominic away. Dominic thinks, damn, not again. And sure enough, he ends up locked up once more. Later, he looks at the empty dishes and thinks that's rich, coming from someone who already finished all of this. Just how desperate was he to eat that much? After that, they're brought before the Lord again. Standing there is Patrick Sinclair, the current Lord. Dominic and Ian both bow. Patrick tells them to raise their heads. As Dominic lifts his head, he can't help thinking, damn it, at least let me finish my tteokbokki. Patrick then says he's heard that Dominic has been supplying this devil's hand. He asks if it's true that the farmer turtles go crazy for it. Then he presses further, asking if that's really the case. Dominic freezes, clearly nervous. In his mind, he panics. He's never actually seen a farmer turtle eat it. And if the question is coming up now, did they catch him for false advertising? Dominic thinks that it's true seaweed is good for women who've just given birth, so there's no way he'd get fined for exaggeration or false advertising. He shrugs it off in his mind. What era is this anyway? Act shameless first, apologize later if needed. So he confidently says, yes, my lord. In his homeland, Thailand, they cook the devil's hand and feed it to new mothers as tradition. Patrick Sinclair pauses and says, is that so? He adds that he knew from the moment Dominic was entrusted with his father's meals that he was unusual. His homeland must be quite unique. Then Patrick turns to Ian and asks what he thinks of this man's conduct. Dominic nervously glances at him and whispers to say something good, even bribing him with tteokbokki in a hushed tone. Ian stays quiet for a moment, then says Dominic is a man of considerable knowledge when it comes to ingredients. He adds that Dominic views the world without prejudice and has the courage to assert his beliefs regardless of rank. Patrick listens closely. Ian continues, saying that at the same time, Dominic blends idealism with practicality to solve problems, making him useful wherever he is placed. Patrick nods and says that for the notoriously picky Sir Ian Hanover to praise someone like that, very good. If even his character is sound, there's no need to test him further. Then he reveals that his wife recently gave birth to a precious son. Dominic is surprised and immediately congratulates him. Patrick continues that 2 days after giving birth, she still hasn't left her room, so he wants to entrust Dominic with his wife's postpartum care starting today. Dominic is caught off guard and thinks this is one sudden job offer, but he quickly agrees on the condition of 1 gold coin per week. In his mind, he celebrates, thinking his era of success has begun. Later, outside a room, a voice suddenly shouts absolutely not. Another voice tries to calm her, asking her to at least hear him out. The woman refuses, saying she doesn't need it. She's already overwhelmed, and now they're sending a cook. Is this some kind of joke? Outside, Dominic mutters that there goes his weekly pay. He asks Ian if she's always been this sensitive. Ian says he's never personally served her, but she wasn't known to be like this. Even he can't make sense of it. Then a maid comes out and apologizes, saying the Countess hasn't had any appetite lately. She adds that she will report this to the Lord herself. Dominic thinks that the Lord said she hasn't left her room since 2 days after giving birth. She eats the seaweed soup just fine, so she does have an appetite. Then why, suddenly, then it clicks. He remembers his previous life when his sister gave birth. He recalls how swollen she was afterward, almost unrecognizable. Looking at the situation now, he realizes this is most likely postpartum edema. The swelling must be severe. He says that out loud, and the staff lady is surprised, asking how he knew. Dominic explains that her body is storing water and fat to produce breast milk, and for a quick recovery, diet is absolutely crucial. He says he can help. The staff lady asks him to wait a moment. Dominic thinks that this is the Lord's first child. A noblewoman who already moved very little must be moving even less now. As the staff lady prepares to enter, Dominic continues thinking that if she had been eating alongside the old Lord's rich, salty meals, that would only make things worse. Before they go in, Ian tells Dominic that when he spoke about him to the Lord, he emphasized his strengths. He says he trusts Dominic will resolve this by relying on those strengths again, and tells him to do well. Dominic, slightly caught off guard, jokes that did they suddenly become friends or something? Is it because of the tteokbokki? Ian brushes it off and tells him never mind. The door opens. The staff lady invites them in. Inside, the Countess says that since he was entrusted with her father-in-law's meals, she will trust him. But as soon as Dominic sees her, he realizes the situation is serious. Her self-esteem must have taken a hit. He even suspects postpartum depression might be involved too. If that's the case, this is dangerous. The Countess says she has already restricted her food intake, yet the weight won't come off. She asks if she should reduce it even more. Dominic immediately says no, you must eat. She reacts sharply, asking if he's mocking her. She says she needs to lose weight and he's telling her to eat more. Dominic says that's right. She needs to eat. Just as one takes medicine prescribed by a healer when ill, what he gives her will serve as medicine too. He tells her that if she follows his instructions, she will soon return to her original form. The Countess asks him to promise. He says he promises, as long as she follows the diet exactly as prescribed. She agrees, saying she has no other choice but to trust him. She gives him 3 weeks, until the birth ceremony where she must appear before the people. Dominic takes her hand and says of course, leave it to him. Later, as he begins preparation, Dominic thinks that if he manages her diet properly, the swelling should subside quickly. The challenge is that they can't sacrifice nutrition. Ian asks if her condition is worse than the old Lord's. Dominic says no, the old Lord's case was more severe. Gout is a clear-cut disease after all, so it was actually easier to plan his meals. When the problem is clear, the solution is clear. But with her, he explains, swelling is only part of the issue. The real goal is full body restoration. At the same time, she needs to regain stamina to nurse the baby. That makes it tricky. Ian suggests handling it one step at a time. Dominic pauses. Ian explains that when he trains, he always focuses on the next step. Solve what's in front of you one by one, and eventually you reach the goal. He wonders if this situation isn't the same. Dominic realizes he was overcomplicating things. The ultimate goal is recovery. So for now, he'll focus on reducing the swelling first. He decides on the direction of the diet and admits to himself that Ian can be surprisingly helpful sometimes. Later, morning arrives. Dominic presents the meal and greets her, saying that this may feel unfamiliar. It's a Korean-style breakfast. He lays out black bean brown rice, perilla seed seaweed soup, whale salad, braised lotus root, peanuts, semi-dried grilled fish, and seasoned radish. A staff member adds that he insisted she drink something after every meal, water boiled with pumpkin. 1 cup after each of the 3 meals and 1 before bed. They explain it's a pumpkin decoction that helps reduce swelling, flush toxins, and support vascular health. Lady Monica says she doesn't understand half of it, but she'll know once she tastes it. She takes a bite and then asks Emily if something's wrong with her. After not eating properly for days, it tastes a bit bland. Emily explains that it was deliberately made lightly seasoned to help reduce swelling faster. Monica pauses, then accepts it. She finishes the entire meal and sighs, saying it's been days since she's eaten this well. She feels sleepy and asks if she should take a short nap. Emily relays Dominic's instruction that she should take a light walk for about 30 minutes after eating. Monica reminds herself that she agreed to follow his instructions, so she forces herself to walk. After a while, she laughs a little and admits her stamina has really dropped. After that, Emily tells her the bath is ready and asks her to wash up. Monica asks what now. Emily explains that Dominic said she shouldn't bathe for too long, no more than 10 minutes. At that point, Monica starts getting irritated. She thinks Dominic is taking away her only comfort. Later, after the bath, Emily says next is massage therapy, and even if it hurts, she must endure it. Monica can't believe it. In her mind, she warns Dominic that she's following his instructions, so if she doesn't recover, she won't let him off easily. Even so, she keeps going through everything step by step, all while thinking about him. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Dominic is casually enjoying some good food. He suddenly notices someone and asks if he interrupted something. Then Patrick Sinclair laughs and says the smell was too tempting, asking if he can have a bite too. Patrick says that at their first meeting, he saw her for the first time at a banquet after his father returned from the capital. He continues, saying they fell for each other at first sight, and before long, they promised to spend their lives together and got married. He says he still can't forget that first meeting. Then he explains that after his father's retirement, he inherited the Lord's castle. On top of that, thanks to the goddess's blessing, his wife became pregnant, so he was busy day and night. He says he was overwhelmed managing the territory, but he never neglected his wife. He believed, no, he was certain their love would never change. But then his tone shifts. He asks why his wife only gets angry at him now. What did he do so wrong? He says her mood swings are too extreme. He can't keep up with her at all, and everything revolves around her. He wonders if marriage is supposed to be like this, then adds that they probably wouldn't understand. Dominic thinks that the Countess is probably more sensitive because of the blessing ritual. But Patrick keeps going. Dominic recalls that even when he met her before, her mood swings were quite intense. Still, there's one thing he wants to say, so he tells Patrick that even so, he still loves her, doesn't he? Ian, listening from the side, wonders if that was supposed to be comforting. Time passes, and the day of the birth blessing ritual arrives. Dominic looks around and is surprised at how many people are there. Ian explains that it's the Lord's son, so of course many nobles have gathered. As they observe the crowd, people nearby start whispering. One person wonders how much she's changed. Another says it's only been 4 weeks since she gave birth. How different could she possibly look? A woman mockingly says she's looking forward to it. She used to be a nobody noble without even a territory, but after becoming a countess, she acted all high and mighty, so she wonders how miserable she must be now. Hearing this, Dominic mutters that this feels less like a blessing ceremony and more like a gossip session. Ian admits that while it's not entirely like that, some people definitely have their attention elsewhere. Then Ian turns to Dominic and asks if he's really that relaxed. It's only been 3 weeks. Shouldn't he be worried about whether the Countess has shown any results? Dominic replies that as long as she followed his instructions, there shouldn't be a problem. Ian immediately calls him out, saying he sounded so confident before, but now he's pushing the responsibility onto her. Dominic says no, he trusts her. He says the lady has strong willpower. He corrects corrected both her diet and lifestyle, so the results should show quickly. Once the swelling starts going down, it drops fast. Ian stays silent, thinking, trust, huh? Then the announcer calls for attention and declares that the blessing ritual will now begin. He says life is always precious, and this ceremony is to celebrate the birth of new life. He asks everyone to bless it with one heart and one mind. Dominic and Ian listen along with the crowd. The announcer then calls for Patrick Sinclair and his wife to make their entrance. The choir begins to sing as the couple steps forward. The crowd reacts instantly. One person says she barely looks any different from before giving birth. Another says they heard she was severely swollen, so how did she manage this? Someone else is shocked, saying there's no way. Another whispers that this doesn't look like someone who gave birth just weeks ago. Did she use magic? Meanwhile, Ian watches quietly and thinks that the village chief can't even handle mana, has terrible adaptability, and doesn't have the talent for magic, and yet, somehow, his words carried a strange weight. He wonders if it's confidence. Where does that kind of belief even come from? Then Dominic casually says it looks like he'll have to head back to Evergreen right after today's party. Ian is surprised and asks if he's giving up his position as the ladies' diet manager, especially when he was so excited about earning 1 gold coin per week. Dominic shrugs and says he can manage her diet remotely, just like he did with the former lord, by sending letters weekly. His pay might be reduced, but it can't be helped. In his mind, though, he's thinking about opportunity. Right now, he smells money. Later, at the party, everyone is enjoying themselves, but one woman stands off to the side, clearly jealous. A servant approaches her and says she has arrived. The woman asks if she found anything. The servant confirms that someone has been assigned to professionally manage the countess's meals. The woman frowns and asks, meals? A chef? The servant clarifies that not exactly a customized diet. The woman narrows her eyes and asks if he's not a chef. Then who is he? The staff says that apparently it's the village chief from a small village within the count's territory. Hearing this, the jealous woman thinks to herself that a village chief won't be easy to bring here. If the Sinclair family protests, it could cause quite a stir. The staff agrees it could create unnecessary trouble and rumors. The woman hesitates, thinking that drawing attention again would only put them at the center of gossip, but she can't just give up. If even the countess managed to change like that, then maybe her own body could change too, if it's that same person. Later, Dominic wakes up early and wonders who it is at this hour. Uncle Kalen is already there, laughing. Dominic asks what brings him here so early. Kalen jokes about Dominic's reaction and tells him to relax his face, asking if he really hates seeing him that much. Dominic asks if something happened in the village while he was gone for a month. He points out that Kalen said he'd send a letter if anything important came up, but he didn't receive anything. Kalen laughs and says something important did happen. He hands Dominic something and tells him to open it. Dominic asks what it is and opens it, only to find a pile of gold coins. He bursts out laughing, realizing it's the money from selling the seaweed. Kalen explains that it was sent by the Anton Trading Company a few days ago, and this is Dominic's share. Dominic is surprised and asks if Anton became independent from his grandfather. Kalen confirms it. Business partners increased faster than expected, so Anton made the call. He says the kid has guts, and it's all thanks to Dominic. They made way more money than they ever did from fishing. Dominic shakes his head and says there's no way he could have harvested, washed, dried, and packed all that seaweed alone every day. This was all thanks to the village's fishing cooperative. Then he suddenly says Kalen came at the perfect time and asks him to take a look at something. He shows him a large map. Kalen is confused and asks what in the world it is. Dominic looks serious and says that if this works out, their village will never have to worry about food again. Near the beach, a group walks along the shore. Dominic points out that this beach has shallow waters and curves inward, so the waves aren't strong. Uncle Kalen agrees and says that's exactly why they can't even launch fishing boats here. It's basically a dead spot, just a place for kids to play. Even the farmer turtles don't come this way, and the white sand spreads out beautifully like a painting. Dominic looks around and says it's perfect. Kalen asks what he's getting at. Dominic smiles and says they're going to put nature and relaxation front and center. They'll turn it into a resort. Everyone is confused after hearing that. Even Ian looks puzzled, especially when he sees construction already happening around the beach. He blurts out what in the world is going on. Nearby, an excited worker is cheering everyone on, shouting that they can do it and even dancing around with sticks. Ian asks Dominic what he's doing. Dominic casually replies that he's supervising construction. Ian points out that this is the first time he's seen a supervisor who hates getting his hands dirty this much. Then he tells him to wrap it up and follow him. Dominic asks where they're going. Ian says it's the village chief's meeting. It's already been a month. At the meeting, someone announces the next agenda item. They say that since they're giving clothes as a gift to the newborn young master of the count's family, it would be best if the colors don't overlap. One village offers to prepare prepare green clothes. Another says they'll handle blue. A third interrupts, arguing that they already claimed blue earlier. Someone else snaps at them to put out their sigil before speaking. Dominic watches this and thinks they should just draw lots or something instead of arguing. Then a staff member informs them that the soldiers are currently in outdoor training, and after the Lord gives a speech, he'll be having lunch with them. The meeting leader says they should go as well. Others get excited, saying it's great luck to see the Lord today. Dominic, on the other hand, thinks what's so lucky about it sounds like a hassle. He decides he'll just go and clap along with the crowd. As they arrive near the training grounds, one of the older men comments that the training looks tough. He starts rambling about how there's no war now and questions whether this can even be called real training back in his day. But before he can finish, Dominic notices one of the soldiers training and immediately thinks something's wrong, dehydration, maybe even vomiting. He walks up and asks when it started. The soldier, breathing heavily, asks if he means him. Dominic quickly checks and asks if he's had symptoms like nausea, chills, diarrhea, or fever. The soldier admits he started feeling nauseous that morning. He has chills and his stomach hurts too. He clearly isn't well. Dominic thinks, since this morning, he immediately heads to the kitchen. The chef greets him, saying he figured Dominic would show up for the village chief meeting and asks him to lend a hand. But Dominic cuts straight to it and asks if he can look around the kitchen. The chef shrugs and says sure, there's nothing special there anyway. He asks if Dominic is looking for something specific. Dominic scans the area and suddenly says he found it. He points to a box and asks if those oysters were delivered yesterday. The chef confirms they were and insists they were packed with plenty of ice, so they shouldn't have gone bad. Dominic asks if they were served to anyone. The chef recalls that he gave some to a soldier named Mickey, saying the guy loves shellfish. Whenever there's a delivery, he comes to help out, so the chef even made him some ceviche to taste. Dominic pauses at that ceviche. He thinks about it, raw seafood mixed with lemon juice, vegetables, and herbs, a delicacy especially near the coast, but eating it raw can easily lead to problems like this. The chef gets defensive and says he already checked everything. It didn't go bad. Dominic firmly says it did go bad, it's shellfish poisoning. The chef is shocked and repeats it, shellfish poisoning? Then he looks at Dominic in disbelief, saying he didn't expect the village chief to know about something like that. But then his tone hardens. He says shellfish poisoning usually happens in winter. He warns Dominic that he's holding back out of respect, but if he walks into someone else's kitchen making accusations like this, it won't end well. Dominic says that just because it's summer doesn't mean shellfish poisoning disappears. He explains that in hot weather, people usually avoid raw food because it spoils easily, so cases are actually harder to notice. He points out that the soldier, Mickey, is already showing symptoms: dehydration, diarrhea, chills, and muscle pain, and it all started that morning. The chef freezes, then asks if that's really true. Dominic continues calmly. He says none of the other soldiers have symptoms, only Mickey. And since it started this morning, assuming a 1 to 2 day window, what does the chef think caused it? The chef's face turns pale as it clicks. He starts spiraling, thinking that under normal circumstances it might not matter, but right now they're in extreme heat training, personally overseen by the Lord. If something goes wrong, he'll definitely get fired. Then what about his daughter's tuition? His retirement plans? Worse, his wife will kill him. And what if he gets imprisoned for causing troop losses because of food? He's completely panicking. Then Dominic steps in and says he'll help. The chef is stunned and asks what. Dominic smiles and says they've built some rapport, so now that he knows what's going on, he can't just walk away. The chef nearly breaks down in relief and calls out to him gratefully. Dominic quickly shifts focus and says it's almost lunchtime, so they need to change the menu fast. But the chef hesitates. He explains that extreme heat training assumes real combat conditions, so meals are handled the same way. Since food could be poisoned, all ingredients must be reported to the commanding officer in advance, and the situation has already been reported to the Lord. The oysters contaminated with shellfish poisoning have to be discarded. Dominic pushes back and asks why throw them away when they can just cook them. The chef is shocked. Cook the contaminated ones? Dominic explains that when you have a cold, you eat something hot and sweat it out, right? Similar here, if you boil or cook them thoroughly, the problem is gone. The chef says that actually makes sense, just as expected of the village chief. He praises Dominic, saying he really knows everything about ingredients. Dominic, however, thinks to himself that shellfish poisoning is basically caused by a foodborne virus, like norovirus. If it's exposed to temperatures above 85 degrees Celsius for over a minute and a half, it gets eliminated almost instantly. But he holds back, knowing that if he says all that, they'll probably just call him a fraud again. The chef then asks what they should do with the oysters, what kind of dish can they even make with them. Dominic says, let's do this. Later, later, the soldiers are training intensely under the blazing conditions, while the Lord watches over them. In the middle of it all, a rich aroma suddenly drifts through the air. The Lord pauses and asks what that smell is. As the cooking begins, the chef watches closely. Dominic moves quickly, explaining each step. He says they'll coat the oysters in beaten egg and pan-fry them with plenty of oil. Then he adds that they should squeeze lemon juice and mix it with a bit of sugar. It needs some tanginess to stimulate the appetite. Another staff member comes in and says he was planning to shred chicken and make a salad, asking if they can use it for soup too. Dominic immediately agrees and suggests making dakgajang, something spicy. He smiles and adds that since it'll be hard to prepare enough rice for all the soldiers, they should serve it with wheat noodles instead. Ian watches from the side, already curious about what kind of dish this will turn into. Out on the training grounds, the soldiers are still pushing themselves hard, but soon they start catching the smell drifting from the kitchen. Their focus begins to break. The Lord also notices and asks what on earth they're having today for it to smell this good. Ian replies that it seems the kitchen really put in the effort. The Lord nods, satisfied, and orders the training to stop so they can begin the meal. He reminds everyone that the soldiers eat first. The soldiers instantly light up, cheering and rushing forward, chanting about food. The Lord watches them and thinks that loyalty doesn't come easily. Unlike his father, who was a master knight, he considers himself ordinary. So if he gets the chance, he should keep creating opportunities like this to connect with his soldiers. As the food is served, the chef nervously apologizes, saying they couldn't prepare much. The Lord waves it off, saying it's fine. They're in a training situation after all. He then asks what the dishes are. The chef explains that the yellow dish is made by mixing chopped oysters with vegetables, coating them in egg batter, and frying them in oil oyster john. He adds that it boosts immunity and helps restore stamina. Then he introduces the red soup made with chicken and chili peppers. He warns that it's quite spicy and tells them to be careful. He adds that it's nourishing, helps with energy recovery, and even contains noodles that can be scooped up and eaten. The Lord nods and says this is great. The soldiers dig in. One says it's spicy but somehow addictive. Another challenges him, asking what he means by spicy. A third jokes that if you can't handle this, you're not even a man. Someone else points out the sweat running down his forehead as he says that. The Lord, curious, wonders if it's really that spicy. He takes a bite and immediately realizes, yeah, it's definitely spicy. The Lord thinks it's a completely different kind of spice from the tteokbokki the village chief made before. This one feels like it clears out your insides. He takes another bite and says, wow, this is good, really good. The chef nearly breaks down in relief, saying he's alive thanks to the village chief. Later, Dominic and Ian stand aside watching the soldiers enjoy the meal. Dominic says he's glad everyone likes it. He was worried the strong aroma might be too much. Ian asks if he doesn't intend to tell the Lord about his contribution. Dominic looks confused and asks why he would. Ian points out that from what he's seen, Dominic and his village could use the Lord's support. Wouldn't this be a chance to earn a reward? Dominic just laughs and says Ian is too naive. If it's obvious to everyone that you did something remarkable, do you really need to show it off? Ian asks what he means by that. Right then, a voice calls out to the village chief. It's the chef, who excitedly thanks Dominic, saying that thanks to him, they got through this safely, and the Lord even granted a special bonus. Dominic sighs and asks if he really couldn't keep quiet about it. The chef apologizes and says of course not. He wants to give Dominic the entire bonus, but he can't take away the shares of the kitchen staff, so he asks him to understand. Dominic nods and says they worked hard too, he gets it. Then another attendant approaches and asks Dominic, the village chief of Evergreen, to follow him. He says Dominic will be meeting the Lord shortly and should adjust his attire. Dominic agrees. As he turns to Ian, who still looks confused, Dominic smirks and says see, no need to push it further. Ian stays silent, but inwardly feels like smacking him. Later, Dominic stands before Patrick Sinclair again. The Lord says that if Dominic hadn't stepped in, the soldiers would have suffered greatly. He admits he's already lost count of how many times Dominic has helped him. Dominic humbly says it's nothing. The Lord adds that Dominic called it a seashell marinade, and thanks to him, it turned into a delicious meal. Dominic responds modestly, but in his mind, he notes that the Lord eats the head chef's food every day, so he must have immediately realized someone else cooked this. Still, the fact that he even identified the shellfish preparation so quickly shows he's quite capable. The Lord asks that if he were to entrust Dominic with managing the kitchen and household of the castle, would he refuse? Dominic answers politely that he appreciates the praise, but there is already a skilled head chef serving there, and more importantly, his village is currently focused on a major project. They are putting everything into it, so stepping away now would be difficult. Patrick Sinclair becomes intrigued and asks about this project. Dominic sees the opportunity and explains that Evergreen, though under the Lord's rule, has always been a barren fishing village without any real specialty. Recently, things improved thanks to selling seaweed, but if the farmer turtles leave, that source of income will disappear as well. That's why he kept thinking and worrying, so the villagers wouldn't end up starving again. The Lord understands and says this project must be the result of that effort. Dominic confirms it. The Lord then admits that Dominic has been doing the kind of work he himself should have been doing as a ruler and offers to support him. Dominic immediately replies that his help is necessary, and that bold response makes the entire room fall silent. Even Ian is taken aback, unsure how to react, and for a brief moment even the Lord seems caught off guard. Elsewhere, a man clutches his stomach in frustration. Rondo, the guild master of a trading company. He complains that if Anton hadn't started selling that strange seaweed, he would have completely controlled the food trade within the Sinclair territory. Now, he's at risk of losing market share to a brat who isn't even 20 yet. Furious, he shouts at his subordinates to stop standing around and come up with a solution. One of them hesitantly suggests taking Anton down or even burning his warehouse, but Rondo immediately shuts him down, asking if he looks like some thug. He reminds them that it's been over 10 years since he left his mercenary life to become a proper businessman. Another subordinate then speaks more carefully, explaining that people are saying Anton's success is actually thanks to a village chief from a small fishing village called Evergreen, the one who figured out how to make the seaweed edible. Rondo listens and simply responds, asking what of it. The subordinate continues, saying that if they deal with that village, Anton will stumble as well. Once that happens, those fishermen will naturally fall in line, and while they're at it, they could even monopolize the seaweed too. Rondo pauses, then smirks, thinking it's a genius idea. He says it's actually a solid plan. Then he laughs and orders them to drag them all out, and to make sure that so-called village chief ends up crippled. The Lord asks if Dominic truly doesn't need his help, and Dominic calmly replies that he doesn't need assistance. He needs an investment. The word catches the Lord's attention, and he repeats it with interest. Dominic explains that if the Lord provides the initial capital, he will return it later along with profit. Patrick Sinclair is taken aback for a moment, then bursts into laughter, saying Dominic is far more interesting than he expected. While everyone else tries to drain his wealth, this man is proposing a proper deal and even promising returns. He agrees, saying that if it's a deal, there must be terms, and Dominic must have prepared them. Dominic hands over a document, which is passed to the Lord. After reading it, the Lord remarks that Dominic wants funding without interference and approves of that kind of backbone. He agrees to the proposal, ordering the treasurer to proceed with the investment, setting a repayment period of 10 years with interest slightly lower than the banking guild's average. Dominic feels relieved, bows deeply, and expresses his gratitude. The Lord, watching him, thinks that perhaps this project could turn their territory into something even the capital nobles would envy. Soon after, the news spreads and excitement erupts in the village. Uncle Kalen excitedly announces that the Lord is investing in Evergreen, praising Dominic for pulling off something huge. Dominic casually points out that Kalen is holding the document upside down, which he brushes off with a laugh. Regaining focus, Dominic says that now that funding is secured, they need to move forward with construction. Kalen agrees enthusiastically, saying money was the biggest obstacle and now that it's solved, it's time to celebrate. He suggests grilling meat, and the villagers immediately cheer, shouting for food and praising Dominic. Nearby, a few onlookers smile, noting that it looks like they'll finally have some fun for once. As night falls, the celebration continues, with people praising Dominic and saying he was different from the start. Kalen proudly claims that this success proves his sharp eye for talent, only for someone to immediately tease him by pointing out that he once skipped learning to read because he didn't feel like it. Kellen grins and says he saw it all with the eyes of a dragon. Someone instantly shoots back that it looked more like the eyes of crap, and Kellen snaps, threatening to shave his head bald. It's all loud and messy, until Dominic suddenly notices movement in the distance. He squints and points it out. Someone else takes a closer look and mutters that they don't look like friendly visitors, especially showing up right in the middle of their barbecue. Just like that, the mood shifts. The same uncles who were joking a second ago go quiet and tense up. Dominic can't help thinking these are the same guys who laugh through rough fishing days. When did they start looking this scary? Ian steps forward and says they'll handle it together. Kellen nods, clearly reassured. Ian tells Dominic to step back and hide, but Dominic is already gone, calling out from somewhere safe that Sir Knight can handle it. Ian just sighs, finding that weirdly irritating. The strangers get closer, and one of them shouts, asking who the village chief is and ordering everyone to kneel with their eyes closed. Ian doesn't even hesitate. He says they should take them alive and figure out who sent them. Kellen agrees, and the two of them rush in. Things explode into a fight almost immediately. The attackers are still on horseback, but they get dragged straight into a brawl. One of them yells in disbelief, asking if these are really fishermen and why they hit so hard. Another shouts for everyone to get off their horses. Someone else keeps yelling not to kill them, just knock them out, while another complains about all the instructions mid-fight. One of them even wonders if the villagers hired mercenaries. Meanwhile, the villagers don't say much, they just fight. Off to the side, Dominic is somehow still eating while watching all this like it's a show. He's honestly impressed. He thinks this is the first time he's seen these uncles fight properly, and they're actually really good. Way more intense than anything he's seen before. He even starts thinking he should cook better meals for them from now on, maybe proper snacks too. And then, just like that, it goes wrong. Someone slips up behind him without him noticing. Something sharp presses against his neck, and a voice says they found him. Dominic jumps, swearing under his breath. The guy behind him looks him over carefully and thinks he matches the sketch exactly. This has to be the village chief. The attacker tightens his grip and shouts for everyone to stop, warning that if they don't, their village chief is as good as dead. Kellen turns around and instantly panics, yelling Dominic's name. Another villager blurts out why he didn't hide properly. The man holding Dominic barks at them to drop their weapons and raise their hands, telling them to cooperate if they want him alive. Kellen doesn't hesitate. He starts yelling that they'll do whatever he says, just let Dominic go. Dominic, meanwhile, is thinking, are these guys serious right now? Behind the attacker, Ian is already moving, slowly circling in. The tension is thick. Then one of the attackers suddenly notices and shouts to his leader that there's a knight behind him. The man freezes for a split second and turns. Too late. Ian lunges forward, but the attacker panics and snarls that if it comes to this, he won't go down alone. He tightens his grip, clearly about to take Dominic with him. Kellen shouts in desperation, yelling Dominic's name again. Ian also calls out and rushes in faster, still a moment too slow, and then something unexpected happens. Dominic moves first, grabs the attacker, and flips him clean over his shoulder. The man hits the ground hard. Dominic just stands there, stunned. He looks at his own hands like he doesn't understand what just happened. Kellen stares at him, wide-eyed, asking what that was. Dominic, still confused, says it was an over-the-shoulder throw. Kellen bursts out, asking if he really just did that, saying he's got some serious moves. Dominic is just as shocked, wondering if he actually pulled that off. Does he have some kind of hidden talent? The villagers immediately crowd around him, hyped, telling him to try it on them too, joking not to complain if something breaks. Off to the side, Ian watches quietly, his expression changing slightly. In his mind, he wonders what he just saw. Did mana actually move inside the village chief just now? But when Dominic tries to repeat the same move on Kellen as a joke, he completely fails. That only makes Ian more suspicious. Now he's certain of one thing, he has even more reason to keep an eye on him. Not long after, Anton arrives and explains the situation. He says these guys have been lurking around their shops for a while, so they've been watching them too. This isn't the first time they've pulled something like this. Someone asks if they're always this bad, and Anton says yes, they're infamous for it. He's heard they'll use any dirty trick, no matter how dangerous, just for money. Still, even he didn't expect them to go as far as open looting. One of the captured men scoffs and says who the hell this Rondo is supposed to be. He insists they're just bandits, not anyone's underlings. From the way Anton talks, he guesses this Rondo guy sounds just like them. Dominic lets out a small laugh and steps forward. He says, really, you're telling me you don't know? He adds that if they had answered properly, he was planning to let at least one of them go. What a shame. That immediately changes everything. One of the bandits suddenly blurts out that he'll talk. Another quickly follows, saying pick me instead. In seconds, multiple voices start competing. Their leader looks furious, thinking aren't they supposed to be bandits? Dominic raises an eyebrow and points out how they were denying everything just a moment ago, and now they've completely changed their tune. Honestly, that just makes them more annoying. Then he asks if anyone else wants to volunteer. One nervous-looking guy steps forward and says he hasn't even been with them for 3 months. This is his first raid. If they spare him just this once, he swears he'll live honestly. Dominic looks at him for a moment, notices how soft his palms are, and decides he's probably telling the truth. He tells him to come along. The guy looks relieved and thanks him repeatedly. As they question him further, Dominic asks if it's true that the Rondo Trading Company gets ingredients so cheaply because they run farms at dirt prices. The young man nods and says yes. He doesn't know all the details, but he's heard that the farmers are people dragged in after failing to pay debts. Their land land gets taken through loan sharking and they're forced to work it instead. Dominic frowns and asks what they mean by loan sharking. There's supposed to be a maximum interest rate set within the Count's territory. The young man looks genuinely confused and asks if such a thing even exists. Dominic says of course it does. The boy scratches his head and explains that someone like Dominic, who can read and is educated, might know that, but ordinary people like them don't understand complicated laws. Hearing that, Dominic can't help thinking it's the same everywhere. Anton steps in and asks what else the boy knows about the Rondo Trading Company. The young man hesitates, then says they often raid small villages and shops, threatening and assaulting people. He adds that it's not confirmed, but he's heard they even set fire to rival businesses on purpose. Anton's expression changes immediately. He recalls a past incident and realizes that might have been them. He says they'll need proof that the head of the company actually ordered all this. The young man nods nervously and says he might have something. He explains that when they successfully complete jobs, they receive promissory notes. He pulls one out and says it was for a different job, but it was issued under the name of the head of the Rondo Company. He asks if that would help. Dominic looks at it, then lets out a small laugh. He tells the boy that he might not have to keep hiding or running anymore. The boy looks confused. Dominic explains there's something called extenuating circumstances. He says he'll keep the note until everything is settled and promises that they'll protect him in their village. The young man breaks down, thanking him over and over, saying he'll live honestly from now on. Later, the case reaches judgment. Rondo stands there, desperately protesting that it's unfair, that everything is a setup and he didn't do anything. Even with the evidence laid out clearly, he keeps insisting he's innocent. Patrick Sinclair watches, unimpressed, noting that even now he refuses to admit anything. Rondo continues to plead, swearing he's been wronged. Dominic and Ian stand nearby as the judgment is delivered. The authority presiding over the case finally cuts him off, saying there is more than enough evidence and witnesses, yet he continues to lie until the end. The verdict is then announced. 4 crimes including arson, assault, fraud, illegal loan sharking, human trafficking, threats, and robbery. All assets of the Rondo Trading Company will be confiscated, with part of it used to compensate the victims. In addition, Rondo is sentenced to forced labor with no possibility of pardon. Rondo collapses, still protesting. The final order is given: send him to the mines. Rondo breaks down as he's dragged away, shouting that this can't be happening and demanding to know what the people he paid off were even doing. Patrick Sinclair immediately picks up on that and asks what he means. Were there really people taking money from someone like him? The judge confirms it and says they'll investigate to the very end and root them all out. The Lord nods, satisfied, and tells them to proceed. The confiscated assets of Rondo are then presented, and even the Lord is a bit surprised by how extensive they are. He orders that anything easily liquidated be put up for auction immediately, with the proceeds going to compensate the victims. He also warns them to avoid any unnecessary trouble during the process. Everyone agrees, and preparations for the auction begin right away. Afterward, Ian asks Dominic what he plans to do now that everything's settled. Dominic casually says he'll try to grab as much as he can from the auction, especially the farm Rondo used for ingredients. Ian pauses and asks why the farm and not the company itself. Dominic explains he needs it for a cooking institute. He absolutely needs a stable supply source. That just confuses Ian even more, since he still hasn't fully understood Dominic's earlier resort idea. Soon, an announcer calls everyone's attention, declaring the auction will begin and asking all participants to listen carefully. Then he drops a rule change. Each participant can only bid on up to 2 items. The crowd immediately protests, saying this wasn't mentioned before and asking how they can suddenly change the rules. The announcer calmly replies that it's the Lord's decision. He believes it would be wrong for a few individuals to monopolize the assets of a criminal. The mood turns sour, but people grudgingly accept it, now forced to rethink what they'll bid on. Dominic glances toward the Lord and realizes what just happened. This rule gives him a real chance. He smiles to himself and quietly thanks him. The announcer begins listing the items: the company building, Rondo's residence, his mansion, carriages, horses, jewelry. The list keeps going: clothing, shoes, food supplies. Dominic stands there practically praying under his breath, hoping everything lines up for him. Then the final item is announced: the Lutwia farm. Dominic's eyes light up instantly. With the bidding limit in place, competition should drop a lot. Now he just needs fewer people to go after it. The auction begins. The announcer moves on to the next item and says it's a luxury dress that once belonged to Rondo. The moment he says dress, the whole crowd goes a bit quiet and confused. confused. Still, the auction starts. Dominic mutters under his breath that he wouldn't take that even if it were free. Somehow, the bidding climbs anyway, and it's sold to bidder number 35. The man proudly says it's a luxury piece and that he plans to gift it to his wife, but the way he says it makes a few people, including Dominic and Ian, a little unsure if that's really the plan. Dominic just goes, I see. Then the announcer calls out the next item, the Lutwia farm. Dominic straightens up immediately, saying finally. The announcer explains that the land isn't very large, but it's fertile and good for growing crops. However, it's surrounded by mountains, which makes expansion difficult, and the only access is a narrow trail. On top of that, the current workers were all tied to Rondo through illegal loan sharking, so they'll be returning home. Whoever buys the farm will need to either hire new workers or sign new contracts. As the starting price is announced, people start whispering. Some wonder if they're even trying to sell it properly. Others point out that once you factor in road construction and expansion, it'll take forever to turn a profit. To them, it feels like another awkward item, just like that dress. Ian glances at Dominic and asks if he's really planning to buy it. Dominic just says it's perfect, and just like that, he secures it without much competition. Afterward, Anton and the young man both congratulate him, saying that even though it's a small farm, it's valuable, and winning it at base price is honestly pretty lucky. Dominic laughs it off and says it's not luck, it's just that he's lived well, and now heaven is rewarding him. Anton still looks curious and asks why he even bought it. Wasn't he planning something like a village farm? And if it's something interesting like the seaweed, he wants first access. Dominic shrugs and says it's nothing that special, but then quickly adds that he does need Anton to get him some seeds. Anton raises an eyebrow and asks if he's planning to farm. He asks what kind of seeds he needs. Dominic hands him a list. After reading it, Anton says getting seeds isn't a problem, but with this many types, each has its own proper ratio, so it might take some time. Then Dominic casually adds that he won't need fertilizer. That surprises Anton. Dominic explains he's not using fertilizer at all. He's going fully nature-friendly. Anton looks at him like he's lost it and says, "Village chief, since you're a fisherman, you probably don't know much about farming. Fertilizer is essential." Dominic cuts him off immediately, saying first of all, he's not a fisherman, and it's not like he knows nothing about farming either. Anton presses again, asking if he really won't use fertilizer. Dominic stays firm. He already said he won't. Then he asks if Anton has ever heard of organic farming. Anton just blinks and asks, "Organic? What?" Ian, standing nearby, quietly wonders what kind of trouble Dominic is about to start now. Anton sighs and says if Dominic is serious about using no fertilizer, no growth agents, and no pesticides, then he can still get all the seeds ready within 4 days. Dominic nods and asks if he can pay with seaweed and dried mussels instead. Anton agrees without hesitation, and that's enough for everyone to get excited again. A bit later, under the bright sun, a cart rattles along a rough path. Inside, Dominic is clearly not doing well. He's hunched over, coughing and looking miserable. Ian glances at him and asks if he's not going to stop already. Dominic shoots back that it's not like he can just stop this on command. Ian mutters that it looks like Dominic can't handle traveling very well. He adds that they were warned the road to the farm wouldn't be easy, and maybe Dominic shouldn't have gone so hard on the drinks the night before. Dominic complains that they said no one even uses this road anyway. Ian tells him to just hang in there. They're almost there. After a bit more struggling, they finally arrive. Dominic climbs off the cart, takes a look around, and immediately perks up. He says nice, they kept calling it small, so he expected something tiny, but it's still a proper farm. Ian shrugs and says, well, yeah. Dominic crouches down, grabs a bit of soil, and says that for its size it was expensive, but now he gets why. The soil is pitch black and incredibly rich. Ian nods like he understands, even though he clearly doesn't. Dominic claps his hands and says they'll take a proper look around later, but first, there's something urgent. Ian raises an eyebrow. Something urgent? Dominic answers without hesitation, hangover cure. Ian looks at him like he's kidding and asks if they shouldn't check the farm first. Dominic waves it off, asking if the land is going to run away. Then he adds that Ian's going to eat too, right? Ian gives in and says, yeah, sure. Dominic immediately gets to work, saying first they boil some water. For a proper hangover soup, it has to be this. Then he pulls something out and smiles, saying good, it's still fresh. Ian leans in and asks what that is. Dominic casually says it's blood curd, cow's blood. Ian just stares at it and asks if he's seriously planning to eat that. Dominic just shrugs and drops the blood curd into the pot, saying some people can't stomach it no matter what, so he'll leave it out of Ian's bowl for now. Then he gets back to cooking like it's second nature, boiling the blood and offal, mixing pre-boiled Napa cabbage with soy sauce, gochujang, chili powder, pepper, soybean paste, minced garlic, and ginger. He works quickly, talking through it as he goes. After that, he takes the boiled meat out, brings fresh water to a boil again, and throws the seasoned greens in, letting it cook hard. Before long, the smell starts spreading. It's rich, spicy, warm. Just smelling it already makes him feel better. Ian, who had been skeptical a second ago, suddenly says to put the curd in his bowl too. Dominic pauses and looks at him, a bit amused, saying he thought Ian wasn't going to eat it. Ian just says he'll try it. Dominic grins and says good choice. Yangpyeong hangover soup isn't the same without it. He finishes it off by adding Chongyang chili peppers and serves it with fresh rice, explaining that it's perfect for relieving hangovers, restoring fatigue, boosting metabolism, and all that. Then he looks at the pot and realizes he might have made too much. He laughs, saying he's gotten used to cooking for a whole group. Not that it matters. Leftovers just mean tomorrow's meal is sorted. He starts eating and immediately relaxes, thinking nothing beats a proper hangover soup. Forget cold noodles, pizza, burgers, this is it. A hot, spicy bowl that hits exactly where it should. Ian watches for a moment, still a bit hesitant, but eventually takes a bite. He tells himself it should be safe, but at the same time, he realizes he still has a long way to go if he really wants to understand how ordinary people live. Then, mid-bite, Ian suddenly stops and looks ahead. He says they're here. Dominic looks up and spots them too, figures in the distance. He guesses they must be the farmers who used to work this land. Ian doesn't respond right away, because something feels off. As the group gets closer, it's clear these people aren't here to welcome them. Their expressions are tense. Some of them are holding tools, almost like weapons. One of them shouts, and just like that, the mood flips again. The farmers come marching in, tense and ready for a fight. One of them says they may have broken free from Rondo, but that doesn't mean the next owner will be any better. Another adds they should demand their rights now while they still have the chance. Their leader backs it up, saying they need to show who's in charge from the start. They stop in front of Dominic and ask if he's the new owner of the farm. Dominic nods and says, yeah, that's right. One of them immediately says they're not going to be anyone's slaves. Dominic looks confused and tells them they're not slaves. That throws them off. They pause, look at each other, and then awkwardly admit, wait, really? Dominic just says, yeah. Have they seriously been fooled this whole time? The tension melts almost instantly. They scratch their heads, a bit embarrassed, and apologize. Ian, standing there, is completely lost. Then suddenly a young man runs up, calling out to the village chief. Dominic recognizes him right away. Rocky. He's surprised and asks if Rocky lives here, then checks how he's been. He mentions the promissory note Rocky gave him helped a lot. Rocky smiles and says he just got back himself. Then he turns to his father and says this is the village chief from Evergreen he was talking about. His father immediately bows and apologizes for their earlier behavior, saying Rocky told them everything. He thanks Dominic for looking out for his son. Dominic waves it off and says it's nothing. Thanks to them, they caught the culprit and everything worked out. He adds that Rocky just got dragged into that mess. And in the end, things turned out well for everyone, including him getting the farm. Right then, almost on cue, everyone's stomachs start growling. Dominic notices and immediately offers for them to join the meal. No one refuses. They all start eating, and Dominic quickly realizes there's not going to be enough food. He looks around, thinking for a second, then decides to stretch the meal. He grabs some potatoes and starts peeling them. Ian steps in and asks what he can do. Dominic tells him to julienne the potatoes, thin, even slices. Ian nods and gets to work without hesitation. The farmers watch, surprised at how clean and precise his knife work is. Dominic mixes the sliced potatoes with flour and salt, then starts frying them. The sound of oil sizzling fills the air. Finally, he finishes it off with a sprinkle of spicy pepper on top. Just like that, another dish is ready. Soon, the potato pancakes are ready, crispy on the outside, soft inside. Dominic explains they're good for the stomach, help with digestion, and are packed with nutrients, but more importantly, they taste amazing. He tells them it's simple food, but to dip it in the black sauce for the best flavor. The farmers take a bite cautiously, and then their expressions change instantly. It's way better than they expected. Before long, everyone's eating without holding back. Seeing the mood lighten, Dominic decides to bring something up. He says he was going to ask later, but since everyone's here, he'll just say it now. Does anyone already have plans? The farmers look confused, and their leader asks what he means. Dominic explains, things like going back to their hometowns, finding new work. They've received compensation, and now they're free. So he's wondering what they intend to do. The group exchanges looks, then the leader speaks up. He says they've spent their whole lives farming, so if possible, they'd like to keep working this land. Dominic visibly relaxes and thanks them, admitting he was actually worried they might all leave. The farmers are surprised by that reaction, but Dominic keeps going and says in that case, they should draw up an employment contract. That catches them off guard. Dominic lays out his terms clearly. no fertilizer, but all crops will go to him. In return, he'll pay them in gold, distributed 4 times a year. And if extra help is needed during harvest, he'll bring in more workers. The farmers hesitate. One of them asks if he really expects them to farm without fertilizer. Dominic says yes, it'll be tough, but that's how it has to be. The farmer nods slowly and asks Dominic to come with him for a moment. They walk a short distance and enter a storage area. Inside, the farmer gestures around and says these were all grown without fertilizer. Dominic looks around, stunned. He asks, all of this? The farmer sighs and admits the truth. They were actually planning to run away by fall. His son had been dragged off as forced labor, and all he and his wife got in return for their work were a few sacks of root crops. At that point, they figured they were doomed either way, so they stopped using fertilizer on half the fields. He gestures around and asks if any of this can even be sold. Dominic doesn't hesitate. He says of course it can all be sold, and he'll pay them for it separately too. In fact, thanks to this, he can move his plans forward much sooner. Rocky then steps in and hands Dominic a paper. He explains he drew a map to make things easier to understand. Dominic looks it over and is genuinely impressed. He thanks Rocky, thinking to himself that the kid really has a knack for this kind of work. If he learns to read and handle numbers properly, he'll be a huge asset. So Dominic turns to him and says Rocky should take charge of managing the farm's yield and harvest. Rocky freezes, pointing at himself in disbelief. Me? Dominic shrugs and says who else? He's too busy to handle everything himself. There's a lot to manage, and Rocky will need to learn reading and calculations, but if he's willing to take it on, Dominic will support him. Rocky, still stunned, agrees and promises to do his best. The others start thanking Dominic as well, some of them even getting a bit emotional. Rocky quickly tells his father to get up, clearly embarrassed by all the bowing. Meanwhile, in another place, people are talking about Evergreen. Someone explains it's a small fishing village on the coast of Sinclair territory. They say the work there isn't too demanding. Basic second-class spells like alarm or copying are enough, but the pay is low, and it's so remote that hardly any mages are interested. That's why the village offers free room and board for up to 3 months just to attract people. Most of the listeners don't seem too impressed. But then, suddenly, one mage stands up without hesitation and says she'll go. She looks genuinely excited about it.